Well, thank you very much. Today in the Security Council, under any other business, I again raised the issue of the so-called conversion rate in the DPRK context. This sounds a bit technical, and let me put this a bit into context. You know that the ballistic missile program of North Korea and the nuclear program, they're a threat to peace and security, and there are sanctions that have been adopted by the Security Council in 2017 to try and stop this program. The Council decided as one of the measures to place a cap on the export of petroleum in reaction to the DPRK nuclear test in 2017. Now, for the DPRK sanctions regime to be effective, all member states must abide by these resolutions and the sanctions in the resolutions. And this includes the obligation to notify the Sanctions Committee of export of petroleum to the DPRK in the unit of barrels. Russia and China have so far refrained from reporting in barrels. They report in tons. Despite numerous attempts, the issue has been on the agenda for no less than 3 years. To find an agreement on a conversion rate, Russia and China have been stalling the process. As a result, the UN cannot determine conclusively whether the cap has been reached. This undermines this Council's decision to place a cap on the oil export, and more broadly, this damages the credibility of the Sanctions Committee and the Council. As chair of the Sanctions Committee, we have worked closely with both delegations to find a compromise. And while this shouldn't be a complicated matter to solve, it has become clear that the two delegations are politicizing this topic. So it was raised again, and there was broad support for the chair of the Sanctions Committee, not only to raise it, but that this issue is finally resolved. But both China and Russia still stalled today. Thank you.
Ambassador, perhaps in your capacity as the ambassador to Germany in a national capacity, do you believe China and Russia are using this conversion issue to try and cheat on sanctions?
Well, I don't want to interpret it. I just want to tell you the fact. There is a limit of 500,000 barrels, and countries have to report, but they report in tons and refuse that a conversion rate. So therefore, we cannot actually testify as a committee. We cannot testify to these limits being observed.
I have another question, but it's not on North Korea. So maybe one of my colleagues, I don't know. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. So my question is about North Korea. So, as a national capacity, as a president of the 780 committee, what is your view on the current implementation of the sanction regime, against North Korea?
Well, I don't want to generalize it. This is a key issue. Overall, we are working very hard in the Sanctions Committee. We have a very dedicated panel of experts that come out with regular reports. These reports are then also, part of them are also published on the website, and you can deduct yourself about the implementation of the sanctions. So I don't want to give a value judgment. We have considered as chair that this is one of the most important issues on this sanctions regime. When it was adopted, it was a key element, and we see that unfortunately we have a lot of problems of having these implemented.
Ambassador, it's very well known that the so-called humanitarian exemptions to the sanctions are failing, and are failing conspicuously. And are you confronting the fact that many innocent North Koreans are dying agonizing deaths as a result of the United Nations sanctions, and the Security Council is not above the law and could be held to account for this. This is a violation of international law. And the head of the Harvard University Korea project, Dr. Key Park, has agreed to disclose his findings of the very tragic humanitarian consequences of these sanctions. And why is nothing being done? I mean, it seems that the Security Council has no sense of responsibility.
No, thank you very much for this question, because it allows to clarify. What are we facing? We are facing a situation where North Korea is defying international law. North Korea, against international law, is continuing to develop a ballistic missile program, and it's continuing to entertain a nuclear program. This is against international law. The global community has told North Korea to stop this. If North Korea would stop their illegal programs, they would no longer need to spend money, enormous money on this program, but could spend it on the development of their country, on providing the population what the population needs most, and that is indeed to get enough food, to get education, to get chances to work, to have a chance to travel. So it is foremost the obligation of the North Korean regime to look after the fate of the population. On the other hand, what we have, of course, done, and again, I'm grateful for your question, there is a humanitarian exceptions. And we have been, as the chair of the Sanctions Committee, we have done everything to see to it that all the exceptions that are asked for humanitarian delivery of humanitarian goods to North Korea, that these exceptions are being treated on a priority level. It doesn't take, on average, now more than 2 days to get a green light for all humanitarian delivery to the country. We are working very closely with OCHA. Actually, we'll have a meeting of OCHA with the Sanctions Committee because in the coming days, because for us this issue is very important. We want to give as much possibilities for humanitarian actors to deliver humanitarian to the population. But let me remind you again, responsible for the fate of the people is the North Korean regime. Yes?
Sorry, if you don't mind answering a couple of questions on other issues. The Secretary General has just issued a letter that he sent to the G20 nations, including your country, saying the G20 now needs to scale up ambition and deliver bolder measures to enable developing countries to address the COVID crisis. What are your hopes for this G20 meeting and global leadership on this?
Well, we are discussing Security Council issues. Of course, the COVID-19 is a global crisis, and in the Security Council, you remember, under German presidency, we adopted the resolution that calls for a global ceasefire. So from a point of view of the question that we are discussing, peace and security, we fully back the Secretary General in calling for these ceasefires. And overall, of course, we have to see to it that all countries, that the countries suffering under COVID-19, that we help these countries as much as possible with regard to economic aid, with regard to aid also what possible vaccines are concerned that they have access, and the German government has been very active on the issue.
My other question is about Ethiopia, Ambassador. Do you think that's a subject the Security Council should deal with, given that there are now effects on Eritrea? Ethiopia apparently is pulling its forces out of Somalia. It seems to have regional repercussions. Should it be something that you now discuss in the Council?
Actually, we have been discussing it. The Security Council regularly meets with the Secretary General, and last week it was discussed between the Secretary General and the Security Council. We, as member states, of course, follow the situation very closely. We have, and the Secretary General himself is active. He has talked several times to Prime Minister Abiy. He has talked to African Union, and we are following this very closely. We again see, as in so many conflicts, that the victims are the population that are either are killed or injured or have to flee. We already encounter refugees that leave. So we call for an immediate stop of these hostilities there and for a political solution. Right now, it's as far as I know, it's not scheduled. But I think also if this is if the Security Council can also add value and look at, then we will do. We also listen to what the Secretary General recommends. Okay. Thank you.